Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this talk. We know you all have a busy schedule, so certainly you participating and you jumping on means a lot to us, and hopefully you'll find this discussion very productive, discussion very informative in nature. My name is Anatoly and Brandon. I'm an associate partner, and I have responsibility for North America's cloud security services for IBM Security. I'm joined here by Brandon Jean-Marie. Brandon?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Jean-Marie. I work with Anatoly. I am a managing cloud security consultant for our X-Force Cloud Security Services team here at IBM in North America.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to address all of you. I'm really excited about this talk. Brandon, if we can go to the next slide really quickly. I'll take a couple seconds and tell you about our organization, which is IBM's X-Force Cloud Security Services. We're a global team of security consultants, engineers, and architects. And we cover across all security domains, and we specialize in helping clients of all sizes embrace cloud security from every angle. We'll use this as an opportunity to share some of our insight into cloud security, cloud resiliency, what it means for an organization, how to implement it at a high level. And by all means, we're very excited to also have follow-up discussions with each and every one of you in our virtual booth. I know the virtual booth is an option that's enabled through the platform. So we will be there after our discussion, and we'll have an opportunity to talk through any questions, issues, or comments that you may have. So the overall objective of this discussion is to talk about cloud security and cloud resiliency and talk about what organizations should keep in mind as they prepare for establishing processes and running processes which help maintain operation capabilities and enable quick and effective recovery within the cloud environments. This is especially important in situations like this that we're living through right now when things are not all right. So organizations are faced with new challenges and have to find themselves innovating across different streams where they might not have been prepared for in the past. So hopefully through the content that we'll discuss, as well as any follow-up discussion, you'll have a lot more insight into what organizations should be doing across the board and what are some of the things to keep in mind. One thing that we request is that this is intended to be as dynamic as possible. So if you have questions, you can use the chat feature through your conference portal. We will try to address those questions on the call. And as always, we will be available outside of the call to have any follow-up discussions and deep dives. Brandon, if we can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So I know we have a wide range of participants on this call. Therefore, we're not making any assumptions in terms of existing level of expertise. So we did want to baseline a bit. To set a baseline, organizations adopt cloud in many forms. And those typically include software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure service models. When we talk about business continuity, when we talk about resiliency, each one has its intricacies. Software as a service has least involvement from the organization simply because the model of software as a service is you're paying somebody else to fully manage a specific business system or an application. Therefore, you're relying on them to do all the management, all the homework, and uphold their policies and expectations in making sure their systems are operable and responsive. However, you do also have to have contingencies in place in the event that that particular vendor might be hit with an outage of any sort. When we talk about platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, however, the models change a little bit. Platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, you as an organization that embrace these technologies, embrace these services, you have specific responsibilities for ensuring that whatever you provision, whenever you manage and monitor within those environments is up to a specific recovery objective or is up to a specific availability objective. Brandon, if we can advance to the next slide, please. In terms of how organizations adopt cloud, right? When we put this in perspective, the numbers speak for themselves. Mid-size organizations, large-size organizations, small-size organizations, they all use cloud services to varying capacity, whether it's using software as a service vendors, whether it's actually leveraging cloud service providers and placing their workloads and the data into these environments. But on average, when we talk about large enterprises, we find that nearly 2,000 of enterprise workloads for large enterprises are cloud hosted. And that's at this point in time. We also find that around 2/3 of organizations that leverage cloud services use a multi-cloud model. So whether they're consuming SaaS or whether they have infrastructure or platform as a service provisioned in these cloud environments, they generally do so in multiple cloud environments. Now, if we can go to the next slide. So as organizations make the journey to cloud, there are some security considerations to keep in mind, right? These are some of the security challenges that organizations face. First and foremost, moving actual workloads into the cloud environment can and effectively does affect the compliance and the overall security posture. And the reason why that happens is that as organizations pick and choose which applications and which workloads to move, oftentimes these applications have undetected or previously undetected vulnerabilities, which were not identified previously because the organization had these applications in its internal infrastructure, its internal environment, and those vulnerabilities were not exposed to the outside world. However, when an organization does move to cloud, these vulnerabilities oftentimes come out. Another issue is an organization might have a number of mitigating and compensating controls in its existing environments. And as these applications and systems and workloads are moved into the cloud, those existing and mitigating compensating controls may no longer be effective or may no longer even be available. And as such, the applications and the workloads that now are resident in the cloud environments, be it an internal cloud, be it an external cloud, public cloud, private cloud, they do have a significantly higher risk of exposure to outside elements, impacting its overall security posture, impacting its ability to stay available, keep the data and systems confidential, and maintaining integrity of the process and the data that it's supporting. Now, some of the other challenges are related to really the build out of the cloud environments. Cloud environments have to be thought of as another set of infrastructures. You have another set of tools, another set of processes that you have to implement within your organization. And when you do that, oftentimes your ability to quickly investigate anomalies and look at events and find occurrences of interest within those environments is significantly diminished. And by default, cloud native security controls are not integrated into your existing enterprise security controls. And what that means is that while there potentially are mechanisms that you can leverage natively within these environments for managing and for monitoring the security postures, oftentimes the systems aren't configured by default to talk to one another. So what happens is you have two separate sets of screens, two separate sets of infrastructures, two separate sets of processes that you have to manage. Now, that's further made complicated by the sheer fact that talent and skill set and capabilities for cloud security is very scarce. We see this firsthand within our organizations. Many of our competitors see it firsthand as well. We all are looking for good, smart, strong, skilled resources and expertise. But however, with the rapid proliferation of cloud, it's very, very difficult to actually find the right people and find them at the scale that an organization has to have in order to ultimately uphold and maintain all of those security controls, security requirements, and security processes that the organization has to maintain in order to have that resilience within their cloud environments and cloud infrastructures. Now, what does that exactly mean, right? What are those responsibilities? What are those skill sets, and what are they all about? So this is where we introduce our shared responsibility model. So if we take a look traditionally at what an enterprise does and what an enterprise has responsibilities for when it hosts its own on-premise infrastructure, its own applications, the organization has top to bottom responsibility for everything, all the way from the physical infrastructure to the network environments, to the operating systems, to protecting the data, to managing identity and access and controls, and monitoring of these environments entirely. Now, there's a common assumption that, oh, we're going to go to the cloud, so we're not going to be responsible for a lot of those things. And while that's partly true, it heavily varies on the model that you adopt the cloud environment in. Sure, if you're going software as a service, you have the luxury of relying on a third party for those controls and those operational processes to be enforced appropriately. However, when you as an organization take on infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, you have a shared responsibility model, which means that the cloud service provider, wherever you're hosting this environment, whatever workloads you're provisioning, the cloud service provider themselves have a responsibility for ensuring that they give you a secure platform to do everything that you have to do on. However, you as a customer are still responsible for all of the code, all of the applications, and all the security related processes of the workloads that live in these platforms. And this is a very common misconception. So when organizations do go to cloud, oftentimes the shared responsibility model is not exactly defined. And what organizations find is that there are core and critical security processes that simply are not upheld because they were not anticipated ahead of time. That leads us to a very, very, very scary statistic. And this is something that our friends at Gartner have published. This made industry news in waves. But the Gartner predictions, which are generally fairly accurate, is around through 2023, around 99% of all of the failures of cloud security will be because of a misconfiguration or lack of proper architecture or design or implementation of security controls, which happen to fall on the responsibilities plate of the client. And this is huge, right? This goes back to that shared responsibility model, that it is the responsibility of the client to make sure the applications and systems have a strong enough security posture to maintain that resiliency for those applications and systems and the business processes that they're supporting. To put this into some real world numbers, around 50% by 2021, around 50% of all enterprises using cloud services are expected to have some form of data exposure through those cloud assets. Most of which, again, the cause of is a misconfiguration or incorrect or insecure architecture of those security controls and workloads. So let's kind of see how that all ties in together, right? In order to have resiliency in the cloud, you really need to uphold three major tenets. You need to reduce the likelihood of an event occurring, an adverse event occurring. You need to be prepared and practice what you're going to do in an event that a specific event occurs. And you have to have vigilance in order to identify that things are occurring, as well as having a good support system and have a good response capability. Right? Again, reducing the likelihood means you are securing your environment, you are securing your workloads to the extent that they need to be in order to prevent an adverse security event, be it a compromise, be it a security breach, be it an outage of any sort, be it an attack by a third party, be it an attack by a malicious actor. The preparation and practice are, again, very, very critical, which is focused around ensuring that you have detailed response plans, you have playbooks, you understand your threat scenarios and different threat vectors and threat actors that can impact your overall environment, be it a global pandemic, be it a malicious party, be it an environment, be it an act of nature or God, whatever it may be. And again, from the vigilance perspective, it's ensuring that you do have the cross-enterprise visibility into the risks, you understand your threats, you have the ability to deeply investigate and respond to events, and then you also have a good support system in place so that if an incident or if an event does occur and you need help in responding, just simply because you might not have enough resources available to you or you need specific expertise across certain domains, ensuring that support system is in place is extremely important. What we'll do now is we'll shift the conversation to focus on number one, which is how do you reduce that likelihood? How do you ensure that the security posture of your environments and your systems is held to the highest standard possible? Again, to reduce that overall likelihood of an adverse impact. So Brandon, this is where I'll pass it off to you. And then as you'd like, since I am sharing my screen, as you'd like for me to advance the slides, please let me know and I will do so accordingly.
Yep. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and I think it has a couple clicks to get to the full 8 initiatives. There you go, and go back one. Perfect. Thanks, Anatoly. So, guys, apologies for the technical difficulties, but we're going to go ahead and get into this. So, like Anatoly said, we're going to focus on reducing the likelihood, therefore increasing your cyber resiliency. Right? You're going to hear me talk about this a lot. You have to take a holistic approach to the cloud because cloud touches so many different things: data, application, infrastructure, database management, compliance, all of these things, right? So if we start on the top left, we're going to look at cloud security strategy, cloud security and compliance strategy, right? We need to have a set strategy going forward. Who is responsible for what? We worked with a lot of clients. We've seen clients where the dev team is responsible for deploying the cloud. The security team doesn't see it until deployment. And this causes issues, right? So communication and culture is really big here, and our overall strategy on how we're going to implement security from design all the way to deployment. Next, we're going to talk about cloud security posture management. This is something we do a lot with clients. This can be done natively on the cloud by introducing native security controls, like obviously making sure S3 bucket is private, or encrypting a database. But we want to drive these across the whole cloud deployment, right? And how do we manage that posture and make sure configurations don't drift? Because that configuration drift is what Anatoly is talking about, where we have misconfigurations, and those tend to be the biggest breaches that we see in the cloud infrastructure today. And then how do we continually monitor compliance, right? This kind of folds into CSPM, where we want to ensure, the regulation and compliance world is ever changing. There's new compliance things coming out daily. And we want to ensure that we have the frameworks in place to drive that across our cloud infrastructure. We can do that in an automated fashion as well. And we can also develop this feedback loop to where we're constantly improving our cloud environment, and we're improving the stuff that is being deployed onto cloud, whether it be apps or just bare data. And then how are we looking at threat management? We want to stop the threat actors. We want to stop the possible threats that could be happening there. So are we constantly assessing our design? Are we using proactive security to continually to monitor our environments to ensure we're not just sitting there and locking down the doors, but we're being proactive in identifying new things like a global pandemic, like stress on systems, and making sure we have visibility and are able to manage those as that comes to fruition. The next thing is, how are we going to secure identities, containers, and data within the cloud? Donnie had a question. I'll kind of hit on it right here. Due to the complex nature of cloud architectures and software like containers, does that make it more difficult to fix that problem? Yes, if the responsibility of who's supposed to fix that problem is not clearly defined, right? So that goes all the way back to cloud security and compliance strategy overall. Who is supposed to patch the system, for lack of a better term, or replace the container with a non-vulnerable container image, right? These have to be clearly defined, and the teams have to be aware of that. And that lends into the next topic, right? We're going to talk a little bit about DevSecOps. DevSecOps has a lot of different meanings that people put out in the market, but it basically boils down to development, security, and operations. That's cloud operations, infrastructure operations, business as usual operations. All of them are working together towards one common goal, right? We often see in clients today that the development has one goal, cloud has another, and the security team is within that, right? We want to be all working towards one common goal, identify responsibilities, and automate as much as we can to ensure we're taking stress off of the teams and they're doing proactive work. And then what do we do when something does go wrong? What is our cyber incident response? And then how are we triaging things here? Do we have capabilities to quarantine containers? Do we have capabilities to isolate something within a VPC so it doesn't spread to our whole system, right? This is stuff that we have to be proactive about to avoid damage to our enterprise or our company. And then how do we respond to that? This could be something as simple as having a great response playbook when something does go wrong, or it can be something as complex of having an active SOC that is continually looking through logs, continually checking traffic and stuff like that. So, Anatoly, you can go ahead and go to the next slide here.
Excellent.
So we've identified these initiatives, and we kind of want to dive deeper into what are some things we can do within that. You can see the stack gets ever more complicated as new technologies like containers, orchestration, automation technologies come out. But the practices still kind of remain the same as what we did, 10, 20 years ago. But we want to ensure we're doing that in a cohesive manner, right? So when it comes to cloud environment and infrastructure security, are we providing secure connectivity, right? Are the things we have deployed secured? Are we encrypting things in transit? Are we enforcing segmentation and least privilege across our cloud infrastructure? The hypervisor and virtualization layer, are they connected to the right routes? One of the things we see often with this is something gets infected and then is able to move laterally to one another. So with containers, we can actually lock that down. With firewalls, we can lock that down. And with mutual authentication, we can ensure we're talking to the right appliance wherever that may be in the cloud. And then are we ensuring the native security controls provided us by the CSP? Are we using those the best to give us the best value they can? The cloud does a great job of giving us a lot of security controls that help us build out this resilient platform. So we need to make sure we're implementing that. And then OS security, right? I'm talking about defense in depth here. If one of these layers, even the operating system that's sitting on a container or sitting on a virtual VM, even if that is not secured, it can leave the whole stack vulnerable. And then secure applications and DevSecOps. So this is kind of my background, so I easily talk a lot about this, but I will spare you. But the basic thing of this is we're hosting applications in the cloud, and they need to be secure coming in, because we see a lot of application vulnerabilities compromise cloud infrastructure. Something as simple as SQL injection or across-site scripting can leave an attacker to gain access to your cloud VPC. That's not something that we want to do. So I get a lot of clients to come back and say, well, we're just securing the cloud. We're not as concerned as the applications we have on that because we know our cloud is secure. And we have to educate them on, that's not entirely true. Because if that does become compromised, there is ways to exploit that, to put malicious or malware or something into the system. Next is secure identity. And it's funny because the past, we used to look at perimeter security as the big things we needed to deal with. We needed to protect the walls, right? We need to have web application firewalls. We need to stop ingress, malicious traffic and stuff like that. But really, the perimeter becomes anything a human touches, and that's inside or outside the organization here, right? So when it comes to secure identity, this is big because who's running the orchestration tools, who's running the automation tools, and is there a principle of least privilege there, right? We want to ensure that the people who have access to do something have limited access to do that, can do that task, and they cannot expand to do anything else. And then that also leads to secure data, right? Our data is our crown jewel. It is a lot of intellectual property. It's how we differentiate our stuff, differentiate ourselves from our other competitors. How are we protecting that data, and how we ensure that it doesn't leave the system, and we know exactly where it's at, and it's classified per risk classification. Next is how do we automate those last things I've talked about? A lot of what I've previously talked about, like identity and access management, building in code scanning, cloud scanning, security controls on the cloud, a lot of that can be automated and driven across the platform with tooling. I'll get a little bit into that in the next slide. And then containers. So I will say about 70% of my client talks deal directly with container security because it is such a new technology and it's so widely adopted because people are breaking down these old monolithic architectures, putting them into microservices, and they're containerizing them and putting them out, right? Containers, as you see, touch all of these things: containers, automation, orchestration, operating system, applications, data. The problem with this is there's just so many more containers than there was a monolithic application, right? So security has to go across all of those things, and a lot of those are acting in a public-facing or a really heavy user interaction, right? Where we want to ensure there's runtime protection, and we want to ensure there's no shadow IT going on. A lot of the issues we see is, developers are deploying containers to see if things work, and they leave the containers out in the production state, and the data is within that, and then that is the entryway into the system. And then last, but we want to look at our overall cloud strategy and governance, right? What are the compliance needs we need to adhere by? Is it HIPAA? Is it GDPR? And then how are we defining the controls based on our corporate policies and those regulatory policies? It looks a little bit different for anyone. And do we take a multi-availability zone or multi-VPC approach here, right? Where we have high-risk applications in one zone, and we have a certain set of security controls that need to go there. And then we have a low-risk section where it's more flexible, and we can get stuff up a little bit faster. And does that meet our needs?
Yeah. So if I may just chime in for a second on this visual.
Sure.
I actually love this visual, quite frankly. And when we have discussions with clients and we have discussions with peers, we oftentimes refer to this visual because you can look at it and you can think about it as a checklist of good practices to have in place in order to address that point number one, right? Which is minimize your risk, right? You're going to cloud. You're going to be putting sensitive, confidential, regulated many instances of data and applications in the cloud. You have business processes that rely on those applications and data, and you are no longer protected by the fortress walls that you have with your on-prem infrastructure. The whole principle behind cloud is deploy fast, access from anywhere, right? So identity does become your first line of defense of making sure that your applications, your workloads are secure from weaknesses and vulnerabilities that can be exploited is critical in these particular situations. So having these both detective and enforcement controls and preventative controls in place for your cloud environments, for your cloud workloads to leverage is absolutely, absolutely essential. And again, making sure that you reduce that risk footprint, which can then downstream lead to adverse incidents or events that the organizations would have to recover from, and many do, and unfortunately many don't. So that was my 2 cents for this one. Brandon, I'll go ahead and advance.
Yeah. And the question from Twitter just popped up, and I want to answer it because it's a very good question, and it's something that I don't get to answer a lot because I don't deal with a lot of small business clients, besides people in my hometown. But it says, should small businesses invest in cloud-based technologies versus on-prem? And then what are the risk factors should smaller scaled businesses address first and foremost? This is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. Small businesses should definitely invest in cloud-based technologies versus on-prem. From a cost perspective, you only consume what you need, and the CSP is going to provide you native controls to do that, right? Now, of course, I cannot make a decision for every small business. There are some cases, I'm sure, where on-prem makes sense for them. But like Anatoly said, the allure of the cloud is to be flexible, to be fast, and a cost reduction, right? So I think it's perfect for small businesses, especially when you're hosting something like a web application and stuff like that. Go ahead, Anatoly.
Couple things that I wanted to add on this particular topic, and that applies, again, small businesses and medium and large businesses alike. When you go to cloud, you are getting economy of scale, right? You're able to generally get tools that you need at a small percentage or even a fraction of the price that you would pay to have them on-prem. And keep in mind, if you're a small business that operates within a regulated space, your requirements or requirements that are imposed on you are not fundamentally different than large organizations. You still have to have the essential security controls and processes. So if you're an attorney, if you have a legal firm, if you have a healthcare firm, small medical office, you're still obligated to ensure the privacy and security of a lot of the data and continuity of your processes. And leveraging cloud services such as SaaS vendors is a fantastic approach to minimize your cost, optimize your spend, and really focus on the niche of your business rather than having to build out that organization. However, in those particular situations, it is highly advisable to have some form of a third-party risk management program, formal or informal, where you have a due diligence approach to evaluate, are the vendors that you're doing business with, do they hold up to security good practices? Do they have any industry certifications, or do they align to specific industry standards such as ISO 27001 or NIST controls or NIST CSF, right? You have a lot of these frameworks in place. You have a lot of certification bodies that will provide attestation to the security posture of that organization. So when you go down the path, no matter if you're a small business, a large business, when you go down the path of actually selecting your vendors, and if you have the opportunity to pick between several, have one of your evaluation factors include their current security posture or alignment with specific security standards or security certifications. Those will go a long way to ensuring that whatever reliance you put on them to ensure that they're doing the right thing is reinforced, and they can back that up because they've gone through an audit, they've gone through an assessment, and there is some form of attestation to their security posture. But that's a phenomenal question. Thank you for bringing that up. Now, I will say, I don't have, because I am doing the screen sharing, I don't have access to the questions themselves. So Brandon, if you want to read those off as they come in, by all means. Some questions will take longer to answer, so we would like to reserve the time at our virtual booth for that discussion as well.
Yep. So a question just came in for Niraj. Niraj, I think I'm going to answer that in this slide, and then I will expand upon it if we have time at the end. So this is what you're seeing on the screen is our security, compliance, and resiliency model, right? So these are the steps we take and the approach we take to ensure that we're building up security and resiliency in the cloud. We're meeting compliance. We can do this across multiple clouds because it's very common that when we go to a client, they're using GCP for e-commerce apps, and then everything else is on AWS or Azure or something like that, right? Or vice versa. So we obviously want to take into account all the regulations, frameworks, the business drivers. What is the business use case here? How do we get to production? What are the threats to a certain business and why? And we take all that and we define and design our baseline for the cloud, right? You know, what is the risk tolerance? What are the policies we need to develop here? And then we can move into enforcing that, right? And part of the ways we enforce that is application security and development there, because this is what's being hosted on the cloud. So we want to ensure we have those integrity checks. We're configuring containers and microservices, API security. All of that meets our standards, right? And then we do scanning, we build, we test. We do make sure security requirements are drawn out and implemented, right? That's shift left here. And then we go and deploy, right? And then this is where we really need to continually monitor because things change, obviously, as everyone in tech knows. So we can actually use a tool here. We use tooling for this is CSPM, and we're continually monitoring what is deployed in our cloud, accounts, what databases are deployed, any appliance that we have out there, and making sure they're adhering to those policies. And if we get a drift, we get alerted, and we go ahead and fix there. Anatoly, did you want to add something?
I did. I wanted to actually stress the importance that the tooling plays not only in baselining the security configuration, right, reducing that risk, but also very, very importantly in upholding one of the principles of business continuity and disaster recovery, which is know your systems, right? Know what you have. And through the use of this tool or this type of tool, we can actually work with clients to enable them to have that visibility. So anytime new resources and new services and new devices and new applications are provisioned in the cloud, being able to identify when that happens, you're then able to effectively tie back to a specific business process, ensuring that you have continuity of that business process anticipated and planned for, again, in a situation that an event occurs that may impact it otherwise.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It definitely gives you an incident response capability and makes you able to be more resilient there. And it also helps you with audit, right? One of the questions we have is, from Niraj is, how do I handle regular requirements across various jurisdictions, and how do your clients affirm or attest to compliance? Well, audit comes in and is going to make you attest to compliance. They're going to audit every piece and making sure you're hitting that standard. And then they're going to give you attestation for you to give to your clients if you're doing that, or whoever is the auditor and auditee there, right? And then there's another question that came in from Zaneta. She said, once you invested in the cloud, who now owns the data you put into the cloud? Zaneta, that is definitely unequivocally whatever data you put in the cloud is yours, and you need to be the custodian and steward of that data, because trust me, when it gets out for a breach or something like that, they're going to come knocking to you and put the blame on you. So
accountability, accountability, like it or not, it cannot be shifted, right? If you get breached, if a third party that you rely on gets breached, it's still your organization that's going to be in the headlines, right? Sure, one of the sub-headlines might lead to the fact that it was a third party that led to that. But that's where the due diligence processes that you have with the organization are put to test, is ensuring that whoever you trust this data with actually have the necessary security controls and the necessary security posture to effectively protect it, right? That's a very, very important piece. Great question, by the way.
Agreed. Yeah, Anatoly, let's go to the next slide real quick. We have 5 minutes left, so I want to just hit on this for about a minute, and then we'll go to our conclusion slide. And then, guys, if you have questions, please come to the virtual booth. We'd love to talk to you. So this is our IBM DevSecOps reference architecture. These are the approaches we take to bring all of those teams together to ensure we're implementing security as a whole, right? This touches cloud, this touches containers, this touches applications, it touches data, it touches integrating with your SOC team, integrating your logs in the SIEM. And this is a continuous approach we take here. And as you see, the number one thing you see, the first thing you see is people and culture, right? If you want to be successful with your transformation with and your cloud journey, you need to have the right people and culture in place to do that, right? It's a proactive, collaborative, automated culture that really needs to take a hold for you. So there's not just finger pointing, there's let's solve this together and get our organization into a better state. I can talk a lot about this. So in the virtual booth, we'll hit on that if you guys have any questions about this, but let's go ahead and go to the summary slide.
Yeah, so before we do, right, we talked about, right, when you go to cloud, your applications, your workloads are out there, they are exposed. They no longer have the luxury, in most situations, they no longer have the luxury of strong fortress walls that you may have had with your on-prem infrastructure. And this particularly applies to large enterprises and the representative of those enterprises on the calls today, right? So that's where ensuring that whatever you do put out there is self-sufficient in its ability to protect and defend. And then very important piece of this, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's actually in the very left side where it talks about threat modeling and risk analysis. This is an activity that's absolutely indispensable. If you as an organization are not performing threat modeling against your applications, you are missing out on the ability to identify what the anticipated threats, threat actors, and threat vectors are, thereby not having the full ability to actually make sure that your applications and workloads have the right defenses and controls in place to protect against those. A lot of them are focused on continuity, a lot of them are focused on integrity, and a lot of them are focused on confidentiality as well. So very, very, very important points here. And I know we are just about at time here. Let me see if, here we go, let me bring this together. So, and we'd love to talk about this in more detail. Certainly this justifies a much broader conversation, a much longer conversation. But ultimately, when we work with our clients to ensure that they are in a position to embrace cloud securely, no matter the organization size, no matter the organization's capabilities today, we focus very, very hard on security holistically. Resiliency is a very, very important piece of this, but to ensure that you have resiliency, you need to have a secure set of infrastructure, you need to have a secure set of applications, you need to have security controls that are not just in place, but also operating effectively, which gets us into, if you remember the previous slide, the second box, which is testing and making sure that you have run books, you have detailed plans, you conduct simulation exercises, not just simple tabletop tests, but actual simulation exercises, because that's when you actually get to be hands on keyboard and ensure and validate that what you've put together actually works, not conceptually, but practically. And of course, last but not least, is remaining vigilant. It's ensuring that you have the right level of visibility across all aspects of your enterprise security posture, your cloud security posture. It's ensuring that you also have someone to call upon if you need help. That's where organizations like us can come in and provide you with those services to help ensure that you are fully prepared and that you have a phone number to call with a guarantee that within several hours, somebody's going to be in your offices or in front of the keyboards, assisting you, ensuring that whatever event or an incident there is to recover from, that we help you and we guide that restoration, recovery, and continuity process, minimizing the impacts to your business. I know we are just at time here. In several minutes, Brandon and myself will make our way over to the virtual lobby. And we would absolutely love an opportunity to talk through any and all of your questions, talk about any of the content that we've talked here about, or anything else cloud security related. So with that said, Brandon, thank you very much for going through the material. I thought it did a great job in covering the technical aspects of that preparedness in terms of mitigating and minimizing risk. I want to thank everyone who's attended. Please join us, enjoy the rest of the sessions, enjoy the event. This is the first virtual event of its kind, and I'm really excited for it. And certainly be happy to talk to any and all of you moving forward.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody.